Are you starting a business or taking it to the next level? Then it's time to pitch your business. After an exceptional Pitch Your Business competition in 2023, we're doing it again. Together, I Am Youth, Radio Pulpit, and Northwest University's Beehive Enterprise Development Center and TBN in Africa are hosting the second Pitch Your Business competition. Receive vital business training online. Total marketing exposure to the value of 1 million rand is up for grabs, as well as an in-depth mentorship by the university. To register, complete the registration form on iamyouth.co.za or radiopulpit.co.za. Register now. Registration closes on the 30th of June 2024 at midnight. T's and C's apply.
You shouldn't allow such opportunities to pass you by. Make sure that if you're an entrepreneur, you are found somewhere in the registrations of Pitch Your Business. The time now, 19 minutes, just after 9. I just want to greet my queen. She is tuned in. I am so humbled. I am so humbled. And I see she's tuning in. And this is Pastor Pepsi Lekhabotsotetsi. Thank you so much, my queen, for tuning in. Such a great surprise and a very nice one, And yes, she'll be joining the family very soon. She'll be joining the family of Radio Pulpit. I can't wait to be talking to her. There is so much that she has that she'll be sharing with us. So we love you, my queen, and thank you so much. Susanna, hello to you. Thank you so much for also tuning in and being with us. Oh, Susanna says, I lived in Italy and also in Rome. Yes, pray for Italy and the Italians. We're doing that. We're doing exactly that. As we are praying for South Africa, we do not forget to pray for others as well. Well, family, I did promise and say that I'll be talking to Dr. Inga Mgaleli. We're talking epilepsy today. And so we have learned that epilepsy is not necessarily a limitation. And people with epilepsy deserve respect, understanding, and support from us. And we need to also end the stigma and empower those affected by epilepsy to thrive and reach their full potential. My queen, Dr. Inga Mgaleli, is on the other side. Hi, how are you, Dr. Mgaleli?
Good morning. I'm wonderful, thanks. How are you?
When you don't seem like it's cold where you at, yes? We are rope. We are rope.
One thing about me, I'll never look or feel like my problem.
I love that.
You'll never know.
I love that. So earlier on, and I was sharing with the family, I mentioned that epilepsy is a neurological condition. Can you just elaborate a little bit and tell us about what epilepsy is? Like, what exactly is that?
Okay. So much like hypertension, sugar diabetes, epilepsy is a chronic condition. That's the first thing that we need to understand. And I'm emphasizing this because there's a lot of misconceptions that people do have about epilepsy. So it is a chronic condition, which means once you have it, unless they find a cause that they can treat, you have it for life. And what it actually is it's unprovoked seizures. And the seizure is basically a sudden surge of electrical activity in the brain, and that happens. Usually, there are things that can cause it, but most of the time, there is no identifiable cause. So it's something that we call it's organic. Like we can't find what's causing it when we do tests and scans and investigations. But yeah, essentially, it's a chronic condition characterized by seizures, usually unprovoked, and we usually don't know what causes it.
All right.
In most of the population.
All right. So just for inquisitive sake, like I'm so inquisitive. When you're talking seizures, I'm thinking about people who were not diagnosed with epilepsy, but they will have a seizure. What's happening there? Because you spoke about electricity in the brain as well.
Yes. So you can have. Let me put it like this: you can have two types of people. You can have a group of people where they have one seizure for the rest of their life. So a seizure is a surge in electrical activity, and then epilepsy is the condition where you have recurrent seizures. So essentially you can have people who have one seizure for the rest of their life. Those people don't have epilepsy. Or you can have a group of people where they have seizures because they have something that is happening in their brain or in their body. And once that something has been corrected, then they never have a seizure again. Those people also don't have epilepsy. So if I can give you an example, someone who has a brain infection, somebody who has, like kids who have fevers, they have seizures, they have something called febrile seizures. So in those groups of people, they don't have epilepsy. They are having seizures. And once the fever has been treated, the infection has been treated, then the seizures resolve and they go away. But then you have a group of people where they have an underlying genetic condition, or they had a brain injury when they were younger, or they were involved in a car accident and they had a brain injury, or they had an infection. The infection resolved, but the complication is that they now have seizures for life. Then those people have epilepsy.
Sure. All right. So now, can you describe what a seizure might look like for somebody who is not quite sure what are we talking about? And are there any different types of seizures? What did we call it when there was another name that people used to call seizures?
Fits.
Fits, yes.
Yeah, we used to call them fits. I mean, we still do.
So,
we
so
still
can
call
you
them fits.
can you describe a little bit about them and if there are any types as well?
Yeah, so we have different types of seizures in terms of how they look. But generally, and so it differs from person to person. But generally, it's a person who is shaking. They shake and then they may suddenly fall. Or they may have a spasm and then they may suddenly fall. Some people may just black out completely, and then other people, they may just fall, So it's essentially this condition of you shaking. And the thing about it is that it's unconscious.
Okay.
You can't stop it. So if the person is shaking and you try and hold them, you shake with them. If they're having the kind of seizure where, you're shaking. And when they fall, you can't break the fall, there's nothing anyone can do to stop the seizure. It's completely involuntary. And then the different types of seizures that we have. So we have the tonic-clonic seizures, and the person is not aware and have violent muscle contractions. And then we have something called, and most of the population who has epilepsy has those tonic-clonic type of seizures. And then we have absence seizures, and this one is common in kids more than adults. And these are the ones where often you hear the teacher will say the child often is daydreaming in class, they drift away, but they actually they're not aware. So it's not actually daydreaming because the child or the person affected isn't aware. There's a loss of consciousness. But to somebody who's looking, it appears that they're daydreaming or they have drifted away. And then you have something called focal seizures, and that's when only a specific body part is moving. So it can either be the violent muscle contractions, or it can be like a jerking movement. And there's either your hand or your leg or your eye. It's just one part of the body that's moving. Then that's something that we call focal seizures.
Sure.
And so different populations and different age groups are more commonly affected by different kinds of seizures.
Sure. As you're talking like this, I am thinking about the ones that I see in children, especially on TikTok, where their parents would talk about them having seizures, experiencing seizures at night, and you find the little one is like staring into air. There's nothing, like they don't have any facial expression, but their body's shaking. Or the body's not even shaking, but they're acting strange and weird. And then the next thing you can see, as though they faced out, as though they faced out. Yeah, and then suddenly they're back to themselves. That is also disturbing. But now, the common thing that we learned, especially when we were younger, is that if somebody has a seizure or a fit, then we put a pen in their mouth. Quickly, put a pen. As they're shaking. But now there's totally a different way of doing it. I was reading somewhere and they were saying as long as the person is safe wherever they at, you don't need to do anything. So should we be putting pants? Should we not do anything? What should we be doing if somebody has a fit around us?
We absolutely should not be putting anything in anyone's mouth who's having a seizure
Yeah.
because you're endangering yourself when you do that. So the most important thing what a person should do when they witness someone is having a seizure is to make sure that their surround are clear, that person has to minimize the chance of them hurting themselves while they're having the seizure. So you want to make sure there's no dangerous objects around them. You want to sort of clear the area. And then you want to gently guide the person to the floor while they're shaking, or you just want to at least make sure that they're on the floor and that there's nothing dangerous around them. Don't put anything in their mouth. Don't give them anything. Just let the seizure pass. Let them have the seizure. If you can, time the seizure to say, okay, it's 1 minute, it's 2 minutes, it's 5 minutes. They are, people. When the seizure is happening, it might feel like it's 15 minutes, but when you time it, you actually see that it's 15 seconds, or it's even less than 1 minute. Most seizures are less than a minute, but it will feel like 15 minutes. And I say this because when people give the history on someone who has had a seizure, they'll say they seized for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
when in actual fact it was less than a minute. It's because it feels like 20 minutes. And you let the person have the seizure, and then most people once they've had the seizure, they go back to their usual self. Some people, they may have confusion or like a little bit of disorientation. In both groups of people, it's better just to seek some medical attention once they have had the seizure, unless you have like a good safety net and good understanding.
All right.
Once the seizure has passed and the person is awake, then you take them to the nearest healthcare provider. Sometimes people don't wake up, or like I said, they have this confusion or disorientation. Those people definitely need to go to the nearest healthcare provider.
All right. When my son had a seizure in front of me, it felt like forever. So
yeah. That's why I was emphasizing that point, because I know it feels like it's 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But, if we were to actually time it, it would be something like 1 to 2 minutes at best.
Mm-hmm. And some will be foaming. So if they're foaming, should we also be rushing them to the healthcare centers if they're foaming? Or
you just let them have the seizure.
Okay.
You let them have the seizure. Once it passes, then you take them to the nearest facility. Remember, you want to minimize any dangerous objects that may injure the person. So, because they may hit themselves against something, so you just want to put them on a flat surface where there's nothing that they can sort of bump into, nothing that can injure them, and then you let the seizure pass. However, sometimes people have ongoing seizures. So in that instance, you don't have a choice. You either have to call an ambulance or you take the person to the nearest facility. That's when they're having ongoing seizures.
All right. Now, is it painful? I'm going to come back to me and make an example with what I saw in my son. He was he was doing something with his eyes that looked like it's painful, with his facial expression as though it's painful. So are seizures painful? Yeah.
So remember, for the person who's having the seizure, at the time when they're having the seizure, they completely they're unconscious essentially. So they don't know that they're having the seizure, and they essentially like have blacked out while they're having the seizure. So they can't feel anything, they can't sense anything.
Sure.
However, what can happen, depending on the kind of seizure that the person has had, once they wake up, some people, because they know their pattern, they will ask, more like, let me say, like adults who they know their pattern, they'll ask, did I have a seizure? Because they don't actually know that they've had a seizure, but they might notice things like they've bitten their tongue, or they've wet
the
themselves,
after effects,
or they've injured themselves, or they may notice maybe a day or two later that their muscles are aching, and then they'll ask, did I maybe have a seizure? So in that instance, you could say that they will experience after they will notice the aftermath of the seizure, depending on what seizure they had. But the seizure itself is not painful. I know it looks like
It
that
does.
person is in a lot of pain because they're shaking violently, and kids, as you rightly said, they often roll their eyes to the back. But they're completely unaware. They can't feel anything. They don't know what's happening.
Okay.
But because they may have bitten their tongue, they may have hit themselves against something, and those violent muscle contractions, a day or two later, your body might ache. And so, yeah, you might experience that.
All right. Now, Dr. Mgaleli, what happens to the brain when somebody is going through a seizure? I remember a parent who was told at health facility, come back when your child has got seizures. When they're okay, like now, we can't. So bring him back when he's got seizures. The child had a temperature. So I'm asking myself, isn't it dangerous to have a seizure? Doesn't it affect the brain? What happens to the brain? Because you spoke about electricity in the brain.
Yeah. So it is a charge. It's a surge. Remember, there's ongoing electrical activity in the brain, which is normal, right? That's why if they connect you and I to a machine, I don't have epilepsy, I don't have seizures, and then let's say they connect someone who has epilepsy and they have seizures. They connect us to a machine called an EEG. It will measure that there is electrical activity in the brain. But when you have a seizure, then there's a sudden surge of that electrical activity. Almost, I don't want to say like a shock, but it's not a shock, really. It's just like a surge of electrical activity. And that they can see that when they measure it on the monitor when you are having the seizure. They won't see it when you're not having the seizure. They'll see it only when you're having the seizure. And so in some people, so long term, let me answer this. Long term, seizures do have an impact on the brain. It sort of injures, it sort of permanently injures the brain if you have ongoing seizures that are untreated. That's why it's so important for people who have epilepsy to be on medication to make sure that they don't have the seizures, because ongoing untreated seizures cause permanent damage to the brain. They sort of scar the brain, to put it in simple terms.
Okay.
And that obviously is not good, because those parts of your brain then don't work.
How is it diagnosed, Dr. Mgaleli?
So it's a clinical diagnosis. It's a clinical diagnosis. In other words, it's based on signs and symptoms. Every person so if you have one seizure, and if you have one seizure and it's one that we don't typically worry about, if you have one generalized chronic tonic seizure and it's uncomplicated and, there's sort of you completely back to normal afterwards, then that's just a seizure. That's not epilepsy. We'll do a few blood tests, we'll scan you if it's necessary, and if everything is fine, you get discharged home and you've had one seizure. That's it. But if you're somebody who's had one seizure, you've had recurrent seizures, or you're having focal seizures, focal seizures are a red flag, because it indicates that there could be something specific that's happening in the brain. So those people, they get investigated. For some people, we find an identifiable cause. We treat that cause, and the seizures go away forever. For some people, we find a cause and it's not treatable, and then those people they have epilepsy because of the cause that is not treatable, or they have experienced complications, like I said. And then there's a cohort of people who we never find a cause. So the blood comes back normal, the scan comes back normal. We don't know what the cause is, so it's organic. Those people also have epilepsy. So those two groups of people I've just described now will have to be on medication that will prevent the seizures from happening. Right. And that medication is for life, unless you meet with your healthcare provider and they make a decision that, maybe we can come down on your medication or you can stop. The other thing about, sorry, just wrapping up, the other thing about people with epilepsy, unfortunately, they can't do activities like driving and like operating machinery, because we can't predict when the seizures are going to happen. Yeah. So those people can't be on the road. They can't be operating like heavy machinery in a factory and things like that. So unfortunately, when you have epilepsy, you can't be in those kinds of occupations just because of the nature of the condition.
But can they drive their own cars? Because you spoke
No,
about
they should.
they shouldn't
No,
even. They shouldn't even.
they shouldn't. That's what your healthcare provider will tell you. That look, you have epilepsy, you can't drive. Ideally, you should not drive because you can have a seizure behind the wheel, and it's dangerous for you, and it's dangerous for other motorists on the road.
It's amazing that yesterday I was talking to a friend who's also in the health sector, and I was telling him about how the blue lights affect me at night,
Yeah,
the police blue lights, and drifted into also talking about people who experience epilepsy, that there are some other triggers. Can you tell us a little bit
yes.
about those ones? I mean, like some programs on TV and stuff. So what should we avoid, and what kind of triggers are these?
Yeah, so it's you talking about the flashlight epilepsy. It is mostly just like the very bright, very bright flickering lights that could trigger that electrical activity. Um, in most other people though, what triggers the seizure will be what's causing the seizure. So if you're having an infection, or if you are having a temperature, like as I said, in children, then what will be triggering the cause. Or in some people, they might have, some imbalances in the electrolytes in their blood. That may also trigger the seizure. Like, people who maybe have kidney problems
Right,
or
right.
things like that, or infections. That's the what's causing the seizure will be what will trigger it. But in most people, not being on medication is what will trigger it.
I also I
Yeah.
was thinking about these programs that you find even on TV where they're flashing and they're very moving very fast, and I was like, I think those ones will also trigger, could be like serious triggers when it comes to epilepsy. Now, we have already spoken about what to do when you see somebody who has a seizure, or who's attacked by a seizure. What to do? Your closing statements to the family where epilepsy is concerned, on how we can support and how we can take care of ourselves if we are the ones who are affected by epilepsy.
Yeah. So I really, really, really love that question because there's still a lot of stigma that's attached to epilepsy, and there's a lot of myths and misconceptions that people have about epilepsy and people who are living with epilepsy. So really, more than anything, it's to understand that it's a disease, it's a condition. Most of the time we don't really know what causes it, and even when we do know the cause, those people can still have epilepsy for life. Those people are normal. Like they're still normal people, and they should be treated as such. And that we should really support them. It's difficult to live with, and it is also difficult to treat. Even when you're on medication, it's difficult to be seizure-free. So people who have epilepsy, they need a lot of support. They need a lot of understanding. And we should try not to ostracize them by, sort of perpetuating and spreading, myths and mistruths about epilepsy and what it is, and how people get it and how it affects them. So essentially it's just about being there, being understanding, being present, and like I've said, knowing what to do when a person has a seizure, and encouraging the affected people, to continue on their medication. Often people are on medication and they become seizure-free, and then they stop taking their medication without realizing that the reason that they are seizure-free is because they're on treatment, and then they start having seizures again. So it's just to encourage, them to continue taking their medication and just support them as needed.
When we grew up, I remember that we were told that these people who are epileptic were bewitched.
Yes, that's one of the most common
Myths.
misconceptions that exist about certain epilepsy, and it's very ostracizing.
Somebody's asking, Swangile, is it treatable? Can somebody heal from epilepsy, Dr. Mgaleli, before you go?
Yeah, so like I said, it's a chronic condition. It needs to be it needs to be treated with medication, anti-epileptic drugs. And so in most people, they are going to be on that medication for the rest of their lives. It's not, you can never heal from it. You're living with epilepsy for the rest of your life. But you may reach a period where you are seizure-free on medication, and with the guidance of your healthcare provider, they may make a decision to wean your medication, as in come down on the dose of medication or come down on the number of medications that you need. And if you remain seizure-free, then maybe you may not need to be on medication, but you would still have epilepsy, but you would just be seizure-free. But all of that happens with the guidance of a specialist neurologist. So it's nothing that ever you just decide by yourself or you decide at the clinic. This is something that happens with a specialist neurologist over time, and it doesn't happen in most people. So, and even then, you're not healed. You still have epilepsy, but you are seizure-free.
Dr. Mgaleli, thank you so much for talking to us, educating and enlightening us about these. How do we get hold of Kiredi if we'd like to be in contact? We want to ask questions, be it epilepsy, be it whatever that Kiredi is involved in?
Yeah, so you can chat to us on our WhatsApp line. You can ask us absolutely anything under the sun on 060-019-0000. And we're also on all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, and you can just search us at Kiredi SA. And yeah, you can talk to us there as well.
All right. Be careful what you say. you can get what you say. You said ask anything under the sun. So
and we do get people who ask us literally anything out of the sun. So you're welcome to. We are open and we're honest and we're non-judgmental.
Dr. Mgaleli, thank you so much for talking to us today. Have a great one.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was Dr. Inga Mgaleli from Kiredi SA. And yes, our regular live conversations with our young doctors are hosted, and you can reach out to them with your thoughts, questions, or concerns on their social media platforms. And their handles are at Kiredi SA, KEREADYSA, and on Facebook as well, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Speak to a young doctor and ask questions by sending hi to WhatsApp, and the number is 060-019-0000, 060-019-0000. I wouldn't say ask anything under the sun. Let's ask the relevant questions. They are doctors, and so they're tackling medical issues, mental issues. So yeah, you can talk to them on that.
Come and ask your questions. Share your